I am from India, and every time I would go back home, my folks would ask me, "Hey, so what do you do?" And I would try to explain them, this is the direct mail you got, or this is the email you got, and we build models behind that, or we help people understand you as a customer. And it would always be the same question after many, many years. This year, when I went back, they're like, "Oh, you are in AI now." And I was like, "Yes, I have been there for 20 years now." So at least now people know a little more of it than they used to.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to and watching another episode of The Chief AI Officer. Today I'm speaking with Namit Sureka, who is Chief Analytics and AI Officer at Straive. Namit, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hi, Ben. How are you today?
I'm great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. How are you doing today?
Very good. It's a warm summer day here in New York.
Yes, it is warm. We've had quite a lot of warm weather these last few weeks, and it's cooling off just enough for me to not be sweating in the podcast studio today. So that's good. You know, before we get started, we have a lot of exciting stuff to talk about today, particularly some of the work that Straive is doing and the work that you do within Straive. Can you give us more of a personal intro to yourself and that first moment you had with AI that has led to you and your career?
Sure, Ben. So the funny thing is, I have been in this industry for a couple of decades now. And when we started, we didn't know what to call ourselves. So we called data consultants, consulting engineers, all kind of buzzwords got thrown around, right? And then AI came into play. The story I always tell people is, I am from India, and every time I would go back home, my folks would ask me, "Hey, so what do you do?" And I would try to explain them, this is the direct mail you got, or this is the email you got, and we build models behind that, or we help people understand you as a customer. And it would always be the same question after many, many years. This year, when I went back, they're like, "Oh, you are in AI now." And I was like, "Yes, I have been there for 20 years now." So at least now people know a little more of it than they used to. I don't know about the aha moment, man, but I have always been intrigued by math and stats. And that's, I think, statistics and engineering fall right into the kind of, realm of AI and probabilistic world that can exist. That's how I got into it and have stayed with it.
Yeah. And do you find that, is it a positive development in the sense that now everyone assumes to know what you do, or do you find it even harder to explain some of the things that you do because everyone comes at it with their own assumptions now?
So I would bucket that into two categories. In the social interaction, it's good for people to know, then I have to answer less questions and they finally understand what I do. In the professional context, I think it has gotten a little more complicated, right? And if you think historically, the way I like to explain to people is it's kind of a scale, right? So earlier, back in the day, when you would go and talk to a client, they would expect data and analytics could service this much. They could answer these many questions. And you would always say, no, it can do more. We can go a little higher. We can go 2 steps higher. We can go 3 steps higher. Now, what has happened is this baseline has moved from being below what they expected to above what they expected, while your level has moved just a slightly above. So now the gap has reversed in the opposite direction, and hence it becomes very, very important for us to manage expectation and tell people we have not found a silver bullet. We have found something that is incredibly powerful, but we have to acknowledge that we are in the nascent stages of development of AI and large language models, and as they're being used in production and use cases, right? So as long as we are entering the space, entering the problem statement with that mindset, knowing fully well that at some level this is still experimental, while some of these use cases can be extremely powerful and valuable, others may take time. As long as one acknowledges and enters the space with that mindset, I think we are destined to be successful.
I agree. I think the shift due to LLMs in terms of expectations versus reality has happened very, very quickly. And what we're seeing in the enterprise in particular is a lot of LLM-based POCs kind of falling down or not quite meeting the expectations of solving everything that they thought. Do you feel like LLMs have become almost synonymous with AI these days? And is that to the detriment of a bunch of other systems that you might be using?
Yes. So as you think of today, AI is almost synonymous with LLM, but every practitioner and people who are kind of in the field and industry using it for their use cases, they know LLM is just a tool, right? Even to implement solutions, you need data, you need engineering, you need regular rules and AI around it to implement real LLM solutions. And I think there might be a case to be made that while people go in, as I said, with the mindset of a silver bullet or with the mindset of solving every problem with this, it is not going to happen. In fact, I will take a classic example. We were doing a large engagement for curating some ESG data, and our team went in with a similar mindset saying, oh, now that I have LLMs, I don't need the rules that I created in the past or the AI models I had, and I could just use LLM to solve every problem I had. I would not say it was a catastrophic failure, but what we did find is it succeeded in certain cases while it did not succeed in other cases. It succeeds in cases where there's interpretation, where there's summarization needed. It does not succeed in places where there's data, where there is tables, and where there's extraction required, right? So where you have to understand numeric data. And in fact, we went back and then we started creating a system where you could use the old rules and the AIs we had developed over many, many years along with LLM to get their best output. And the simplest example is in hallucination. We already had rules around, where the data exists and where the data didn't exist. We took it off and asked the LLM to answer the whole question. And obviously, wherever the data was and wherever the answer was, LLM gave us the right answer, but it also gave us answers where it had no business giving us an answer. And that is where we went back and said, hey, but I already know based on my past data information, I already have an AI model that tells me that this data doesn't exist. So why am I even feeding it to LM? So that became a very, very interesting use case that we're using even internally to educate our people on how to appropriately use and think of incorporating LLM as an arrow in your quiver and not the whole bow.
Agreed. It's really that mentality of there are a lot of AI tools out there. LLMs are another tool, as you said, in an arrow in the quiver, and they're, the real value will be combining all of these different systems together into hybrid systems to really drive value depending on the use case. You touched about it a little bit in terms of that mismatch of expectations today, or at least the shift, but how would you summarize the state of enterprise AI today, and what major changes are you observing, and how is Straive adapting?
Again, I would answer that question in kind of multiple ways, right? So one is, how is Straive adapting in making our internal people be more aware of this technology and use case? Then also how we are going to market with this, right? What is expectation on the client side? What is expectation on our people who are consuming our services? In the latter, I would say, again, as I said, we are going in with a very clear articulation of our experiences, what we can do, what we cannot do, what are the types of use cases that are solvable with it, right? So clarity and communication become very, very important. For internal purposes, what we have done is we've actually enabled the entire 15,000 employees we have globally to have access to open LLMs, right? So they have access to entire LLM, what we call the LLM Foundry. Each and every Straive employee has access to it. And within the confines of various restrictions we've put in, both for open, public, as well as private LLMs, they have access to experimenting with it. Obviously, we have put a responsible AI structure as well. We have put out policies and we have done a lot of training for people to be careful of how they use it. But at least I would say both the education and the training has happened, as well as we have put this tool in the hands of our employees. One thing I would like to differentiate it is, like for a lot of enterprises, for a lot of organizations, Copilot or what I call citizen AI is the end use case. In our view, that is just kind of a starting point that is enabling your people to understand it. But large business value will not be driven by citizen AI. They will have to be thought of as enterprise AI, where they are integrated more into your system, have a proper engineering infrastructure around it that allows clients to drive maximum value out of it.
I love that, the distinction between citizen AI and enterprise AI that can drive truly transformational value. Because I think what is happening a lot is this, ground up from all of the stakeholders within the organization, as you're saying, enable them to use a co-pilot to come up with use cases to improve their every day. But when you then transition into true enterprise-wide transformation, and that's touching critical parts of, different business units, you have to go about it very differently. How are you seeing that? What are the key challenges in operationalizing AI at that enterprise level for you?
So I would say, again, I'll separate the AI part and the Gen AI part of it, right? I think operationalizing AI, a lot of enterprises in financial services, in asset management, in retail, even in pharma, they have taken leaps and bounds in progressing in that over the last over the last decade, right? So I would say implementation of AI, machine learning is still kind of more prevalent, and implementation of generative AI or LLMs in general is becoming more restrictive, right? Because people are not clear of where this is headed. There are two parts to that dilemma, I would say, right? One is the cost of the LLMs. And if you kind of hear from any kind of industry knowledge, a lot of the cost of LLM are supposed to be extremely high now and are expected to be kind of coming down as we go along. What that means is it's not easy for you to develop a business case that can justify a 3-year model, right? So most of the cases where people are actually implementing LLM-led AI solutions is where they see immediate benefit or able to justify the CBA or the cost benefit analysis in a 6 to 12-month window. Acknowledging that kind of nascent stage of the industry we are in, I feel still it has progressed much more than a lot of the other technologies when they have come in the past. From a broader AI perspective, I would say, financial services and risk and fraud are the pioneers in that, doing it over many, many decades now. And that continues to propel itself. As I said, with more tools in the quiver, they are expanding and experimenting with how things can happen even more rapidly and better.
Yeah, I think Straive in particular interests me, as a host on this show and also being part of Elemental Cognition, because you talk a lot about operationalizing, kind of going from data to insights to knowledge in the AI value chain, which is a framing I think is very interesting, focused around obviously as good as your data, but then that aspect of knowledge, right? Can you talk about how you see both more traditional AI and kind of generative AI being operationalized to improve efficiency and decision making in large businesses?
Sure. I think you picked on a couple of key points which I would love to highlight, right? It is about operationalizing AI. What that means is ultimately, whatever you do, it's not about building the fanciest model, it's about implementing the fanciest model. And that's where operationalizing AI comes in, because sexy model sitting in your laptop is not going to drive any value for the enterprise. And that's where, my earlier distinction between citizen AI versus enterprise AI also becomes critical. If, as an organization, we want to drive large scale value, large scale transformation through these technologies, we have to think of it at an enterprise level. So, literally, we like to think of ourselves as blue collar AI, right? In the context of the modern AI, if you think in the LLMs, more and more everywhere we are seeing, while there can be an answer that gets you to 70, 80% right off the bat, getting it to 90, 95, 99%, which will be required in most cases, is extremely difficult. And that is where we think of, almost what you need is what we call LLM ops. It's like not kind of the machine learning ops of the past, but these are literally human inputs into the system that is allowing it to fine tune itself or allowing it to evolve itself to answer those questions better. There are several examples I can give you of how we are thinking of it, right? So we started by asking a question of can you use tabular data? Can you just do function calling to write a SQL code to answer a question? It was a straightforward thing, but it got 70% right, it got 30% wrong. Now, the problem with that is if you give it to your end user and they see the wrong answer, the trust in the system goes down dramatically. So to control for that, you have to put in a middle layer that actually does not expose that right off the bat to the end consumer, to your business partner, to your sales team. What this middle layer does, what I call LLM ops, is they become the arbitrator. They see the answer, they validate the answer, and then feed it to the end consumer. What you're doing is, obviously, right off the bat, you're not getting a 70% efficiency. Maybe you're getting 20% efficiency. But what you're doing is you're building a system for the future that will allow you to be much more dynamic and much more efficient in the future. But those are the investments that you have to make in upfront with the savings that you're getting through the LLM solution itself that you can put in the system to get for the future.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that whole LLM ops infrastructure, monitoring, enabling observability of these systems, then creating that almost validation layer has been so crucial to the rollout of a lot of LLM use cases in business. It still feels like it's all built on top of an LLM to the end of the day, right? So it's very hard to get to that 95, 100% accuracy. That's a view, at Elemental Cognition that we feel very strongly about, because we also feel that the industry in embracing LLMs, which are incredibly powerful, is also doing that sometimes to the detriment of formal systems, very reliable computational systems that the entire enterprise business, has been built on. Do you see that as well in the industry? Are people forgetting how powerful some of the, formal systems are and trying to use LLMs where they probably shouldn't be?
Again, I think, Ben, what is happening is today, if you want investment dollars from any CIO, any CDO, it is only coming from the LLM bucket, right? So
Yes.
whether we like it or not, and I actually think that's fine, right? Because we've been experimenting with certain tools and technologies for long enough. Everybody knows kind of the puts and takes on them. I think it's fair that the recent or kind of the immediate future innovation dollars goes in a very focused way into LM because that will help us advance the technology very, very fast. Now, the other thing is also this technology by itself is moving rapidly, right? Like, when was the last technology that evolved itself in every week, if not, days, right? So I think to your point, there's a bit of challenge where everyone wants people to experiment with the new technologies while they want to kind of keep the old shop running as well, right? So it's a difficult balance. I absolutely agree that that is what is happening, but I think that's next to 6 to 9 month phenomena. Once things settle down, I do expect this kind of to revert to Q3 of, by Q3 of 2025. And as I said earlier, like we have already seen several use cases where the hybrid approach has yielded the best outcome. So once people experiment with LLM, they'll take a step back and say, okay, this is what I'm getting right. Now, how do I improve it? Once you set the baseline with the LLMs, then you go back to saying, okay, for improving it, either I need LLM ops, I need old, computational AI, I need rule-based systems, whatever those are, those will start coming in play, and people will be really mature enough to use all of these together. I would say a large part of enterprises today are not as mature to incorporate all of these in one place, simply because LLMs are being run in some bucket versus the old technology is being run by someone else, and there's these silos within enterprises, so it's not that easy for everything to come together per se. And we all know how enterprises evolve, so I'm fully confident that once people start seeing value, it will integrate and kind of converge to a common ground.
Yeah, that's true. As you rightly point out from, as you said, decades of experience, that there are these hype cycles, things, people get very excited. That's where money goes. And then, things evolve, things shift, technology gets better, but we also remember all of the other components that we can bring into this. You mentioned how fast things are moving, right? How is Straive continuously improving and expanding its AI capabilities these days?
As I mentioned, right? So the first thing is we have expanded the LLM Foundry and we've made it available to each and every employee. Now, the benefit of that is we're getting rapid use cases through it. We're tracking all the use cases that are being put through the solution, the templates that are being created. And at the same time, we're actually updating the models. So today, the way we've created the infrastructure, we don't have to go and teach everyone to use each and every model, right? They can almost use their own prompts. They can use their almost from a drop down, they can pick the model they want to play with and experiment. As we are kind of getting success, we are creating, as I said, enterprise scale solutions to implement it in a more holistic fashion for the broader enterprise. Second, we have created a innovation team. And as for every CIO, our innovation dollars are also going disproportionately in the bucket of LLMs. A lot of it is new people as well as our AI and tech people who were experimenting with ML models or rules systems and so on in the past are being repurposed to focus on Gen AI or have been focused. Thankfully, on this, I would say we have had a little bit of a head start because of the industry and the space we work in. We have been playing with LLM starting with OpenAI for a couple of years now. So there's a little bit of head start we had in kind of understanding and leveraging this technology.
And so as you take those use cases from the kind of different stakeholders, the experimentation, and operationalize them through the business, how do you think about ROI and kind of how do you do that integration work?
And again, this is our point of view when as I said earlier, this technology is so nascent that we don't believe in doing any hard integration or spending a lot of dollars in changing systems and technologies at this point. What we are saying is invest it in a way that we can recover the cost in the next 6 to 12 months. As long as that business case holds, we are executing on those projects. Anything longer, we would rather wait because we do believe both the cost of technology, cost of integration, as well as what technology to integrate with will kind of come down, right? This is, again, maybe a bad example, but if you decided to spend all your dollars on Netscape, you would not have dollars to buy Internet Explorer when it came around. So one has to have a balance of, technologies that they choose. And I purposely choose a technology that is old enough for us not to worry about it, right? So in my opinion, this is too nascent system, too nascent a technology. Today we have, what, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, like there are few big players, and there are thousands of, I would say, what I call cottage players. One of those cottage players could be the Google of the future or the Amazon of the future. So overspending and unnecessary restricting yourself to a 2-year, 3-year window with these technologies is something I advise against.
So am I hearing you right in the sense that you're not committing projects into that enterprise level transformation yet, and it's more of a wait and see approach because you're worried about the viability or just whether it's going to be the best model or the best approach in the longer term?
No, so actually so let me rephrase. So I am committing to enterprise level implementations that are not super expensive. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I have a CRM in Salesforce, right? And I have a LLM solution that has been built outside of Salesforce. Now, one objective would be, hey, force people to use Einstein, which I don't know may or may not be the best outcome, or try to build APIs such that your LLM can connect with the Salesforce enterprise solution that you have. So what I'm saying is, rather than creating those hard integration and spending a lot of dollars in that, because you don't know, today you might be using Claude, tomorrow you might use OpenAI and so on and so forth. We should build the use case in a way that, first of all, the models are transferable or changeable at the back end, so that you have a skin in front that the user understands, and then you have something in the back end that connects with it. Now, whether you really need to spend dollars into connecting with those APIs or you need hard integrations or not, and Salesforce is probably, one example. There are several, your data might be in mainframe, who knows where that is, right? So I'm saying we should not commit to those kind of integration, because those costs of integration can be extremely high, and that you may not have a full view on whether that integration will be needed or required 12 months from now, given the change in technology. So definitely, I'm not recommending citizen AI. I'm recommending enterprise AI, but enterprise AI at a level where there's a soft integration as much as possible to make it efficient, but not try to make it core part of your technology stack.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it speaks also to all of the other work that goes around operationalizing AI, right? That the model can be switched out, specific integrations can be, rebuilt, but at the core, it's, how do we build things in a modular way to make it robust? How do we enable the different use cases that we want? And, obviously with an eye towards the future where we might want to switch things out, shifting a little bit away from the organization and towards, you personally and to others that aspire to be in a chief officer role like yourself. What advice would you give people, and what key skills and experiences should they focus on?
Now, it might sound like philosophy, but I would say one has to learn and learn to unlearn. When we started, like, I don't know, to date myself, but, I have played the entire game from mainframe to Visual Basic to C to Python. And, like, these tools, technologies, they keep changing and evolving. And whether you are the analyst or whether you're the chief AI officer, it is critical for us to keep us abreast of the latest tools and technologies and have that willingness to adopt and change. At the same time, I think it is very important to drive the same change, not only as an chief analytics and AI officer. It's not just about changing yourself, because while you might be very adaptive and open to change, your team has to be the same, because ultimately you'll succeed with your team. So I always encourage people to kind of push for that, drive for change, and make people accepting of change. I'll give an example. Just very simply put, I was having a discussion with some of my team members, and let's say there was a slight pushback on the value of LLMs, and this is like 9 months back, right? Whether it was a hype cycle, there's always somebody who has a contravening view. We came up with a simple hypothesis that let's test every process we are running, everything we are doing, and all we have to do is either write 5 points on why GenAI can help or why LLMs can help or why LLMs cannot help. So no matter which bucket you want to be in, you have to write those 5 points on your process or on your work you're doing. And what, at least in my mind, what that drove is an active engagement with LLMs, trying to understand what it was, trying to understand how they could use to solve their problem, or at least experiment and say, okay, here are the 5 reasons why we failed. So to me, it was a very simple kind of a behavioral change that we could drive with the leadership, and we embedded it in our entire enterprise to be very successful, I would say, in at least changing the mindset. I'm not saying we have adapted it, but today, 1 year later, when I go and talk to my people, nobody's pushing back. Everybody's experimenting, they're excited, they have a new energy, they're seeing things happen, and they're seeing things fail, which is perfectly fine. There's no expectation of 100% success of these technologies.
I love that as a tactical piece of advice, because I think you recognize, writing always helps clarify your thoughts and to recognize what the benefits might be, but also actively think about where there might be limitations is such an important thing before you invest more time.
Yep.
5 years from now, you've spent decades in the field. Any predictions on what the world of AI might look like?
If I could predict, I would not be sitting here. But yeah, we could all be billionaires, Ben. But as I said, again, I don't want to avoid the question, but the thing is evolving too fast and changes are happening quite rapidly. I do believe that this shift is tectonic. It will drive significant efficiencies for a lot of the work that we're doing across enterprises. We believe on point basis, on individual solution basis, it can drive almost 10x benefit, while at project or overall work level, it might drive 30 up to 40% efficiencies. And some areas it might drive 10 to 15% efficiency. So I would say there are a lot more people who know about LLMs. There are a lot more people who are using LLMs, and that there are a lot more organizations that are offering LLMs. So if I were to predict, that would be my prediction. Although I'm very bad at it, so don't hold me to it.
Well, it's always hard to predict, but as you know, you probably wouldn't have guessed that 5 years ago you wouldn't have to tell anyone what you were doing in your job, but today you don't have to. So that's a good benefit.
That's a good win.
Let's see what comes in 5 years. Namit, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much. Before we wrap up, if people want to follow your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Sure. LinkedIn, my profile at Straive, at Graminer. Any of those, please follow. Looking forward.
Amazing. Well, you heard it. That was Namit Sureka from Straive. Go follow him on LinkedIn or send him a direct message if you listen to the episode and have any feedback. And as always, for me as well, please reach out if you have any questions or feedback. I'd love to hear from our listeners. Thank you so much for listening today. Namit, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ben. Wonderful talking to you.